The gym smelled of sweat and old leather. Afternoon light streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the ring. The sound of skipping ropes, gloves hitting heavy bags, and muffled conversations filled the air. Derek Cole was the center of it all. He stood near the middle ring, wrapping his hands with smooth, practiced movements. Everyone in the gym knew him. He was the local champion, the man who had won every match for the past 2 years. He had the strength, the speed, and the confidence that came from victory after victory. But more than his skill, Derek was famous for something else: his attitude. He liked to make sure people knew how good he was. His jokes were sharp, often aimed at anyone who looked inexperienced or out of place. And today, his attention fell on someone new. In the far corner of the gym, a boy stood quietly, watching. He was slim, his frame hidden under a shirt 2 sizes too big. His sneakers looked worn out, their soles nearly flat. The boy's hands clutched a pair of old boxing gloves, the kind that had seen too many fights and too few repairs. Derek noticed him immediately. His smirk appeared as naturally as breathing. "Hey, kid," Derek called out, loud enough for the whole gym to hear. Conversations paused, and a few people turned to see who he was talking to. "You here to watch, or are you planning to learn how to fight?" The boy didn't answer right away. He just kept looking at the ring, his expression calm. "What's your name?" Derek asked, leaning slightly on the ropes. "Malik," the boy replied, his voice low but steady. "Well, Malik," Derek said with a grin, "how about you step into the ring with me? Just for a little fun. I'll take it. Easy on you." His tone was light, but there was a spark in his eyes, a spark that made the gym crowd chuckle. They knew Derek's version of fun. Malik's gaze shifted briefly to the exit door. He could leave right now, and no one would think less of him. But he didn't move. His fingers tightened around the old gloves. "You sure?" Malik asked quietly. "Oh, I'm sure," Derek replied, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "Unless you're afraid." The word hung in the air like bait. The older boxers smiled knowingly. They had seen this before. Derek loved picking on newcomers, especially the ones who seemed too quiet. Malik looked at Derek for a long moment. There was no anger in his eyes, just a stillness, like someone thinking through a choice carefully. Finally, he nodded. "All right." The small crowd in the gym stirred with excitement. A few whispered to each other, already imagining how quickly Derek would win. Derek motioned toward the ropes. "Come on in. I promise I won't hurt you too bad." Malik stepped forward slowly, placing his gloves on the edge of the ring. He untied his sneakers and tightened the laces, making sure they were secure. Then, without any dramatic movement, he climbed into the ring. His steps were light, almost soundless, as if he had done it many times before. From the outside, Derek still looked like the clear winner. He was taller, broader, and had the kind of build that came from years of training. Malik looked almost fragile in comparison. But for a brief second, as the boy straightened his stance in the corner, there was something about him, something that didn't quite match the picture of an easy opponent. The coach, who had been watching quietly from a bench, raised an eyebrow. He didn't know Malik, but something about the boy's calm made him curious. The bell wasn't ringing yet. This wasn't an official match. It was just a friendly spar, the kind that happened often in the gym. But the air already felt different, heavier somehow. Derek started bouncing lightly on his feet, testing his gloves against each other. "Ready, kid?" Malik didn't answer. He just adjusted his gloves, his eyes fixed on Derek. Not in challenge, but in focus, as if he were memorizing the way Derek stood, the way he shifted his weight. Some people in the gym moved closer to watch. They expected laughs, maybe a few quick moves from Derek, and then a playful end. But no one noticed the small detail. that Malik's breathing was slow and controlled, steady as a drumbeat. Derek grinned again, but in that grin was the beginning of something he didn't yet recognize: underestimation. As they both stood in their corners, the coach gave a short nod. This wasn't an official fight, but the signal was clear. It was time to start. And just like that, the first step of a story neither of them expected had begun. The gym had grown quieter. The sound of gloves hitting heavy bags faded as more people turned toward the ring. Even those who had been training at the far side now stood watching. Derek stood loose and confident, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Malik, on the other hand, remained still, holding those old gloves in his hands. He had agreed to step into the ring, but his body language showed no rush. His eyes scanned the space around him, the ropes, the floor, the people. Watching, to an outsider it might seem like hesitation, but there was no fear in his face, only thought. He began to put on the gloves, one slow movement after another. The worn leather creaked slightly as he pulled the straps tight. The gloves were not only old, they were clearly too big for his hands, but Malik adjusted them until they fit as best they could. Derek smirked from his corner. "Take your time, kid. I don't have anywhere else to be." His voice carried across the gym, drawing a few chuckles from the audience. Malik didn't respond. He simply lifted his chin and stepped closer to the ropes. The faint sound of his sneakers against the wooden floor felt loud in the quiet room. He placed one hand on the middle rope and swung his leg up, climbing into the ring with a fluid movement that didn't match his thin frame. The coach, still sitting on the bench, leaned forward slightly. He had seen many new fighters climb into that ring. Most were clumsy, gripping the ropes too tight, moving with uncertain steps. But Malik moved like someone who had been in a ring before. That detail, small as it was, caught the coach's attention. Inside the ring, Malik went to his corner. He didn't bounce on his feet like Derek. He stood tall but relaxed, his hands resting just above his waist. He was studying Derek now, his stance, the way he rolled his shoulders, the slight bend in his knees. Malik's eyes were not hurried. They were patient, as if he was memorizing every detail. A few people in the crowd noticed. "He's not scared," one man whispered to another. "He's watching him." The coach stood and walked to the ropes. "All right, this is just a spar," he said clearly. "No need to go wild. Keep it clean." Derek gave a casual nod, but his smile said otherwise. "Got it, coach." Malik simply blinked once, as if confirming he understood. The coach raised his hand, then dropped it, a signal to start. There was no official bell for this, just two fighters and an audience waiting for entertainment. Derek moved first, circling Malik with light steps. His gloves tapped against each other in a playful rhythm. "Come on, show me what you got." Malik didn't move right away. He kept his feet planted, his hands now lifted slightly. He let Derek circle him, his head turning slowly to follow. Derek threw the first jab, fast, but easy, a tester. It tapped Malik's shoulder. Derek grinned and shook his head. "Too slow, kid." Malik didn't speak. His eyes didn't leave Derek. Another jab came, this time toward Malik's chest. Malik stepped back just enough for it to miss. It was a small movement, almost lazy but perfectly timed. A few people in the crowd made a soft "oh" sound, the kind that came when someone noticed something subtle. Derek didn't seem to care. Yet. "You're quick," Derek said, his voice light. "But I'm quicker." He stepped forward with a combination. Two quick jabs and a hook. The first jab touched Malik's glove, the second barely grazed his arm, but the hook missed completely. Malik had ducked under it, his body turning slightly as he stepped to the side. For the first time, Derek paused. He hadn't expected the boy to read his move that well. The gym grew quieter again. Malik didn't press forward. He stayed exactly where he was, his eyes still fixed on Derek. There was no sign of nervousness in his breathing, no wasted movement. It was becoming clear to some in the room. Malik wasn't avoiding the fight. He was learning. Every step Derek took, every punch, every pause, Malik was storing it away. Derek decided to change his approach. He bounced lightly on his feet, circling faster. He threw another jab, then stepped back quickly, hoping to draw Malik forward. But Malik didn't take the bait. This time it was Derek who stopped first. "All right," Derek said, his grin a little tighter now. "Let's see if you can handle this." He stepped in fast, aiming a quick uppercut. Malik shifted his weight back, letting the punch pass in front of him. And then, just for the first time, he moved forward, his gloves rising in a short, clean motion. He didn't hit hard. It was just a soft tap against Derek's arm, but it was enough to show he could close the distance if he wanted to. The crowd murmured again. The easy match they had expected was beginning to look different. Derek stepped back, rolling his shoulders. The playful look was still on his face, but there was something else now. Focus. The coach, still watching closely, crossed his arms. He knew Derek was talented, but he also knew arrogance had a cost in the ring. And Malik was showing signs that this wouldn't be a one-sided show. The first round of this friendly spar was still going, but something had already shifted. The audience could feel it, even if they didn't have the words. This wasn't just a boy being pulled into the ring to be embarrassed. This was something else, something they would all remember. Malik adjusted his stance again, his breathing, slow and steady. Derek began to circle once more, but now his eyes never left Malik's. The next move was coming. And for the first time, Derek was wondering if this might not be as simple as he thought. The air inside the gym was thick with anticipation. Every eye was locked on the ring. What had started as a playful challenge was turning into something else, though Derek still didn't realize it. He was smiling again, though his smile had a sharper edge now. "Let's make this fun," he said, his voice carrying across the gym. Malik didn't respond. His gloves rested just above his chest, his elbows tucked in close. He stood with a stillness that made it hard to read what he was thinking. The coach gave a short nod. "All right, keep going, but remember, control." Derek stepped forward lightly, throwing a quick jab that touched Malik's glove. He followed with another, tapping the side of Malik's headgear. The crowd chuckled at the playful hits. Derek raised his arms and spun in place like a performer. "Too easy," he said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. A few people laughed. Malik simply blinked once, his gaze steady. Derek came again, this time ducking low and then springing up with a slow, exaggerated hook that Malik easily sidestepped. Derek grinned and looked at the crowd, shaking his head as if to say, "Can you believe this?" It was clear what he was doing now. He wanted the audience to laugh, to see him as a showman. And in his mind, Malik was just part of that show. A quiet, unknown boy to be teased for a few minutes. The crowd played along. Each time Derek swung wide and missed, people chuckled. Each time he landed a light touch on Malik's shoulder, they clapped. But not everyone was laughing. The coach's eyes narrowed slightly. From his seat, he could see something most of the crowd missed, Malik's small movements. The boy wasn't just standing still. He was watching every step, every feint, every habit in Derek's style. It was like he was collecting pieces of a puzzle. Derek began to move faster, bouncing on his feet. He circled Malik, hands low, daring him to attack. "Come on, kid. Show me something." Malik stayed where he was, letting Derek close in. The champion threw another jab, a touch to the headgear, and then danced backward with a flourish. The crowd clapped again, though the sound was mixed now, some applause, some murmurs. It was in that moment that Derek's confidence swelled too much. He turned slightly toward the crowd, grinning, and called out, "See? Not everyone is cut out for this sport." That one sentence settled over the gym like dust. It wasn't loud enough to sting, but it was enough to make Malik's eyes narrow slightly. Not in anger, just in focus. Derek turned back toward him, deciding it was time to give the audience a little more. He stepped forward, quick and sharp, his gloves moving in a flurry. A jab, another jab, a cross. Malik blocked the first two and swayed away from the third. The crowd didn't cheer this time. They had seen it. Malik's guard was too clean for someone who was supposed to be an easy target. Still, Derek pressed on. He began to weave left and right, trying to throw Malik off balance. He faked a jab and then lunged with a hook toward the ribs. Malik shifted just enough for the glove to pass harmlessly in front of him, and then it happened. Something small, but it changed the feel of the room. Malik stepped forward by a single pace, closing the gap. He didn't throw a heavy punch. Just a quick tap on Derek's chest with his glove, but the movement was so fast, so precise, that Derek had no time to step back. A ripple went through the crowd. They weren't sure why, but the mood shifted. Derek's smirk faltered for half a second before he forced it back. "Not bad," he said, though his voice didn't carry the same lightness as before. Malik stepped back again, returning to his still stance. His breathing was steady. His eyes didn't leave Derek's. The coach leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. He could see the story changing. What had begun as mockery was becoming a test. Though Derek didn't seem to understand, he was now the one being tested. The next minute was filled with more of Derek's showy moves. He spun once after a missed punch. He even threw a light tap at Malik's headgear and pretended to stumble away dramatically. The laughter from the crowd returned, but it was thinner now. Some eyes had shifted from Derek to Malik, waiting to see if the boy would answer back. And still, Malik waited. The clock on the wall ticked toward the end of the round. Derek decided he needed one big move before the break. He took a deep breath, crouched slightly, and then burst forward with speed, aiming for a powerful right hook. But Malik wasn't there. He had slipped to the side in one smooth motion, letting Derek's glove cut through empty air. Derek stumbled half a step, surprised. Gasps filled the room. No one had expected the boy to dodge that cleanly. Malik didn't follow with a punch. He simply turned to face Derek again, gloves up, eyes calm. The bell sound from the coach's stopwatch ended the round. Derek stepped back, raising his arms again for the crowd, but the applause was quieter now. People were whispering to each other, their attention shifting. Malik walked to his corner without a word. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile. He simply leaned against the ropes, his gaze down for a moment, as if thinking through every second of what had just happened. Derek, wiping sweat from his brow, told himself it was still a game. But deep down, something uneasy was beginning to form. The boy wasn't playing. The hum of the gym had changed. Where there had once been easy laughter, now there was a quiet edge, as if everyone sensed something they couldn't yet explain. The first round was over, but the air felt heavier than before. Derek sat on a stool in his corner, rolling his shoulders. He told himself it was just a warm-up, just a playful spar to keep the crowd entertained. But in the back of his mind, a small thought was forming, a thought he kept pushing away. This kid, he's different. Across the ring, Malik stood calmly, not even sitting down. He rested his arms on the ropes, looking straight ahead, his breathing steady. The boy didn't seem tired. In fact, he looked as if the round had been nothing more than light exercise. The coach walked a few steps closer to the ring, his sharp eyes moving between the two fighters. He had been in boxing long enough to know when the mood in a fight had changed. This was no longer a game, even if Derek still tried to make it one. The crowd shifted, whispering quietly. Some of them leaned closer to the ropes, curious about what would happen next. The coach lifted his hand. "Round 2. Let's go." Derek stood, tapping his gloves together. "All right, kid, let's make this interesting." Malik didn't answer. He simply stepped forward, his gloves already in position. The moment they met in the center, Derek threw the first jab fast and sharp. Malik blocked it cleanly, then stepped back half a pace. Derek followed with a hook, but Malik tilted his head just enough for the glove to brush past. The crowd murmured. They had seen Malik avoid punches before, but this time there was something different. His movements were smoother, sharper, almost like he was anticipating Derek's attacks before they even started. Derek frowned slightly and began to increase his pace. He jabbed twice, then feinted a third punch, hoping Malik would flinch. Malik didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward suddenly, making Derek adjust his position. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't even aggressive, but it forced Derek to react. And that was the first time in the spar that Derek had been the one on the defensive. The shift was small, but the coach saw it. His arms crossed over his chest as his mind traced what he was seeing. Malik wasn't, just dodging and blocking. He was controlling the space between them. Derek threw another combination, 3 fast punches meant to overwhelm. Malik blocked the first, weaved under the second, and let the third pass harmlessly by. Then, in one smooth motion, Malik stepped to the side, his feet light on the canvas, and tapped Derek's shoulder with his glove before stepping back again. It was only a touch, but in the language of boxing, it said something clear. I can reach you whenever I want. A quiet gasp ran through the crowd. Derek's smile tightened. He moved in again, trying to push Malik toward the ropes. His gloves moved quickly, his steps sharper, his body leaning forward. But Malik wasn't there when Derek expected. Every time Derek closed the gap, Malik slipped away like water through fingers. Never too far, just far enough to make Derek miss. And then halfway through the round, the moment happened. Derek decided to end the exchange with a big, sweeping hook, one meant to land clean and draw cheers. He stepped in hard, putting his weight behind it. But Malik had already read the move. In one clean motion, Malik stepped to the side, letting the punch swing past him, and placed a light but precise jab straight into the open space near Derek's ribs. It wasn't a heavy hit, but it stopped Derek mid-step. The crowd reacted instantly, some clapping, some whispering, some exchanging wide-eyed looks. Derek stepped back, his breathing slightly quicker now. He looked at Malik in a new way. The playful smirk replaced with a tight jaw. The boy wasn't just holding his own. He was landing touches, without being touched in return. The coach leaned against the ropes, speaking just loud enough for those closest to hear. This isn't the same fight it started as. Malik didn't press the advantage. He went back to his patient stance, gloves steady, eyes locked on Derek. He wasn't rushing, wasn't chasing. He was waiting. The last minute of the round was tense. Derek threw fast combinations, but more of them hit air than glove. Malik kept slipping, blocking, and sidestepping, each time forcing Derek to reset. The crowd could feel the rhythm changing. Derek's movements had been easy and confident in the first round, but now they were heavier, more deliberate. When the coach signaled the end of the round, the crowd let out a collective breath, as if they had been holding it. Derek walked back to his corner and sat down heavily. Sweat ran down his temples. He took a long drink from a water bottle, staring across the ring at Malik, who was once again standing rather than sitting. Malik rested his gloves on the top rope, his face calm. His breathing was still steady, and there was no sign of strain in his posture. The whispers in the crowd grew louder now. This isn't going the way Derek thought. He can't hit the kid. Look at Malik. He's not even tired. The coach glanced from one corner to the other, his expression unreadable. But inside, he knew exactly what was happening. A shift had taken place, not in skill alone, but in momentum. Derek was starting to fight harder, but Malik was still in control. As the two fighters prepared for the next round, the air in the gym felt charged, almost electric. Everyone could sense it now. The boy who was supposed to be humiliated might just have the upper hand. The crowd was no longer laughing. The playful atmosphere from the start of the spar had been replaced with quiet focus. People were leaning forward, eyes darting between the two fighters. The coach stood with his arms crossed, watching closely. He knew Derek well, knew his strengths, his weaknesses, and his pride. He also knew that pride could cloud judgment. And right now, it was clear that Derek was beginning to feel something he wasn't used to: frustration. Derek bounced on his feet, trying to shake it off. "All right, kid," he said, his voice lower now. "Let's go." Malik stepped forward from his corner, calm as ever. He kept his gloves high, his elbows tight, his movements measured. There was no rush in him. The coach gave the signal for the next round to begin. Derek moved first, jabbing quickly, testing Malik's guard. Malik blocked the first, slipped the second, and countered with a short jab to Derek's arm. It wasn't a powerful punch, but it landed clean. The crowd gave a small reaction. It wasn't the sound of people laughing. It was the sound of people noticing. Derek came forward again, throwing a left hook aimed at Malik's side. Malik stepped back just far enough to let the glove miss, then answered with a quick 1-2 to Derek's gloves, forcing him to lift his guard higher. That was when the change began to show. Malik was no longer just defending, he was pressing forward in short bursts. Every time Derek attacked, Malik answered. His punches were not wild. They were precise, each one aimed with care, each one forcing Derek to adjust. The crowd started to cheer softly each time Malik landed a touch. It wasn't loud yet, but it was growing. Derek's breathing picked up. He told himself it was because he was moving more, but deep down, he knew it was because Malik was controlling the pace. He tried to break that control. He stepped in hard, throwing a fast combination, left jab, right cross, left hook. Malik blocked the first two, ducked under the hook, and in the same motion stepped forward with a sharp jab that tapped Derek square on the chin. It wasn't a heavy blow, but it was clean. The sound of glove on headgear was clear in the gym, and the crowd reacted instantly. Cheers and surprised shouts filled the air. Derek's eyes narrowed. He had not expected that. The coach's voice rang out. "Keep it clean. Focus." Derek nodded quickly, but his jaw was tight. He stepped forward again, determined to land something solid. Malik moved lightly, letting Derek come in close, before sidestepping and landing a quick punch to the ribs. It was the first body shot that made Derek's breath catch. It wasn't enough to hurt, but it was enough to remind him Malik was faster than he looked. The crowd's cheers grew louder. People began to call out Malik's name, encouraging him. The shift in support was obvious now. Derek pressed harder, trying to corner him, but Malik stayed just out of reach, using the ring space wisely. Each time Derek thought he had him, Malik slipped away and countered. It was a pattern: bait, dodge, and answer. Halfway through the round, Derek tried a new approach. Instead of chasing, he waited, standing in the center of the ring. He held his gloves high, hoping Malik would come to him. Malik didn't rush in. He moved slowly, circling, eyes locked on Derek. Then, without warning, he stepped in with a quick combination: jab, cross, hook. The first jab hit Derek's gloves. The cross tapped the side of his headgear, and the hook clipped his shoulder. It wasn't devastating, but it was 3 clean shots in a row. The crowd reacted with excitement, clapping and shouting. Derek stepped back, shaking his head, trying to push away the noise. For the last minute of the round, Malik kept the pressure on, not with heavy punches, but with constant movement, quick touches, and precise timing. Derek was defending more than attacking now. When the coach called the end of the round, the sound of cheering filled the gym. Malik stepped back to his corner slowly, his face calm, his breathing controlled. Derek, however, dropped onto his stool heavily. Sweat dripped from his hairline, and his gloves rested on his knees. The coach looked at him for a long moment before saying, "You're letting him set the pace. You need to take that back." Derek nodded, but his mind was somewhere else. He wasn't used to being the one who had to adjust. Across the ring, Malik stood again, not even sitting between rounds. His eyes were steady, his body language unchanged. And the crowd? They were no longer there just for Derek's showmanship. They were waiting for Malik's next move. The tide was turning. The sound inside the gym had changed again. It was no longer just cheering for entertainment. It was the kind of focused excitement that came when people realized they were witnessing something special. The earlier laughter was gone. Now, every cheer, every gasp came from genuine surprise at what was happening in the ring. Derek sat in his corner, taking slow, deep breaths. His chest rose and fell heavily, and beads of sweat clung to his brow. The towel draped over his shoulders felt heavier than it should. He could feel his pride bruising more than his body. Across from him, Malik stood quietly as usual, leaning on the top rope. He had not sat down once during the breaks, and his breathing was still steady. The boy's posture was the same as it had been from the first round, calm, patient, watchful. The coach glanced at both fighters before giving the signal for the next round. "Round 6, he called. "Let's keep it sharp." Derek pushed himself to his feet. He no longer carried the same playful grin. His expression was focused, his eyes locked on Malik. He knew now that this was no longer about putting on a show. This was about earning back control, and maybe earning respect. The moment the round began, Derek moved in with intent. He threw a sharp jab, followed by a quick cross. Malik blocked both cleanly, then answered with a smooth hook to Derek's side. Derek stepped back, nodding slightly, acknowledging the touch. For the first time in the match, Derek spoke without sarcasm. "All right, you're good." Malik didn't smile, didn't respond. He simply reset his stance, ready for the next exchange. They met in the center again, trading blows now. Derek's punches came faster, his footwork lighter, and Malik matched him step for step. It was no longer a one-sided attack, it was a rhythm. Derek would land one to the body, Malik would land one to the shoulder. Derek would throw a cross to the headgear, Malik would slip under and counter with a jab. The crowd was on their feet now, clapping and shouting after nearly every exchange. It didn't matter who landed. It was the back and forth that had them hooked. The coach's eyes stayed sharp, but he could not hide the faint smile tugging at his lips. He had seen fighters mock each other before, but rarely had he seen it transform into this. Two opponents locked in a contest built on mutual recognition. Halfway through the round, Derek managed to catch Malik with a clean shot to the ribs. The sound of the glove hitting was sharp. Malik stepped back, nodding once as if to say, "Good one." But instead of retreating further, Malik stepped right back in and delivered a quick combination. Jab to the gloves, cross to the chest, hook that, grazed the headgear. The crowd roared, appreciating the exchange. Derek exhaled sharply, but there was no frustration now. Only focus. The fight's energy had changed completely. Malik was no longer just surviving, he was testing Derek, forcing him to dig deeper. And Derek, for the first time, was giving Malik the respect of treating him as an equal. The punches came faster now. Derek would weave left, Malik would weave right. Derek would land a hook, Malik would answer with a jab. The crowd's cheers rose with every back and forth, filling the gym with a steady hum of excitement. Near the end of the round, Derek threw a sharp cross that Malik blocked, but the impact pushed Malik slightly toward the ropes. Derek stepped forward quickly, hoping to trap him there. But Malik didn't stay trapped. In a smooth, practiced motion, he pivoted out of the corner, letting Derek hit the ropes instead, and landed a clean jab to Derek's side before moving back to the center of the ring. The crowd's reaction was instant. Cheers and shouts filled the air. Derek straightened, breathing heavily, and gave a small nod toward Malik. There was no trace of arrogance in it, just acknowledgement. When the coach signaled the end of the round, the two fighters didn't turn away immediately. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other, gloves still up but no punches thrown. It was an unspoken exchange. "You're not what I expected." As they returned to their corners, the crowd clapped loudly, not just for the action, but for the spirit in the ring. Derek sat again, his breathing heavy, his arms resting on his knees. The coach gave him a look. "He's not just here to play. You see that now?" Derek nodded without hesitation. "Yeah, I see it." Across the ring, Malik leaned on the ropes once more, calm and quiet. He didn't need to speak. His performance, so far, had said everything. The gym was buzzing now, every spectator eager for the final round. No one cared about the mockery that had started this match. No one remembered the laughter from earlier. What they saw now was two fighters, pushing each other, respecting each other, and showing the kind of fight that people talk about long after it ends. The respect was sealed, even before the last bell. The winter sun was gentle that morning, casting a soft, golden glow into the living room. Ethan sat quietly with his coffee, listening to the distant sound of Grace's voice as she played with Lily in the nursery. The sound made him smile without even realizing it. Weeks had passed since the day Grace first entered their lives, and everything felt different now. The house, once cold and silent, now carried warmth in every corner. The laughter of a child and the steady kindness of Grace had turned it from a building into a home. Ethan could see it not only in the way Lily smiled more often, but also in the way he himself felt lighter each day. He had always been a man of discipline and control. His schedule was strict, his emotions guarded, and his home life almost empty. But lately, he found himself coming home early, just to catch an extra hour watching Grace read a story to Lily or help her take her first steps. That afternoon, after Lily's nap, Ethan asked Grace to join him in the garden. The air was cool, and the last of the autumn leaves lay scattered across the grass. Grace carried Lily in her arms, wrapped in a small blanket, and Ethan walked beside them. "I wanted to talk to you," he began, glancing at Grace. "When you first came here, I didn't know if I could trust anyone again, but you've shown me something I didn't expect." Grace looked at him calmly, waiting for him to continue. "You've shown me that kindness still exists without a reason," Ethan said. "You didn't just care for Lily because it was your job. You cared for her because you wanted to, and because of that, I want you to stay. Not just for a few months. I want you to be part of Lily's life for as long as possible." Grace smiled softly. "That's a big thing to say, Ethan. Are you sure?" He nodded. "I am. You've given her love I can't always give, and you've given me a reason to believe in family again." From that day forward, Grace's role in the house became more than just a nanny. She became a constant presence in their daily lives. In the mornings, she would prepare breakfast while humming to Lily, who would giggle in her high chair. Ethan would join them, often with a smile, sipping his coffee and listening to their little conversations. In the afternoons, they would take walks together, with Lily bundled up in her stroller. Sometimes Ethan would carry her on his shoulders, making her laugh so hard that even Grace would join in. Evenings were the most peaceful. Grace would tuck Lily into bed with a bedtime story, her voice calm and warm. Sometimes Ethan would stand, quietly in the doorway, just watching the gentle scene unfold, feeling a deep gratitude he could not put into words. As weeks turned into months, Ethan began to notice how much Grace had changed not only Lily's life, but his own. The walls he had built around his heart were slowly lowering, replaced with trust and a quiet joy. One snowy afternoon, Ethan came home early and found Grace sitting on the floor with Lily, building a small tower of wooden blocks. Lily clapped her hands when the tower fell, and Grace laughed. "You're home early," Grace said, looking up with surprise. I couldn't stay away, Ethan replied with a small smile. I wanted to see you both. It was such a simple moment, but it stayed with Ethan for the rest of the night. When Lily's first birthday approached, Ethan decided to plan something special. He arranged a small celebration at home, inviting close friends and a few neighbors. Grace helped decorate the living room with colorful ribbons and balloons, while Lily sat in her playpen, watching everything with wide, excited eyes. On the day of the party, Ethan stood back for a moment, watching Grace carry Lily to the table where a small cake waited. She helped Lily blow out the candle, and the room filled with cheers. In that moment, Ethan felt a quiet happiness, the kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. After the guests had left and Lily was asleep, Ethan found Grace in the kitchen, cleaning up. "You've done so much for us," he said, "and I don't think I've thanked you enough." Grace smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. Being here with you and Lily, it's already more than I expected." "But I want to," Ethan replied, "because you've turned this house into a home. And I hope you know that, no matter what, you're not just Lily's nanny. You're part of this family now." Grace's eyes softened, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was enough to know they both understood the unspoken truth, that what began as chance had grown into something lasting. In the months that followed, life settled into a gentle rhythm. There were no grand events or dramatic changes, just the steady comfort of shared days and small joys. And for Ethan, that was more than enough. He still worked hard, but he no longer saw success only in numbers. Now, success was Lily taking her first steps while holding Grace's hand. It was the sound of laughter at the breakfast table. It was the warmth of coming home to a place filled with love. Grace, too, found something she hadn't realized she was missing. A place where she was truly needed, and a family that cared for her as much as she cared for them. And so the story that began with a single unexpected moment, a stranger feeding his baby, became a story about trust, kindness, and the quiet ways love can change everything. Ethan knew he would never forget the day he first saw Grace holding Lily. At the time, it had filled him with suspicion. Now it filled him with gratitude, because sometimes what you least expect turns out to be exactly what you need.